4-4, this is 7, stand by a minute. Just come on, what is your attack angle?
Okay, talk to him, see what that did. Charlie Horse, 88.
2-4, traffic 27.
85 just made a pass in there. Can you give us any?
Go 2-1, 77.
Roger, sir, be advised we have Jolly Green 2-1 and 6-6 standing by over
Okay, I'll put it a little closer than those trees. Let me come around with a loud 3 and I'll put it on those trees there.
Roger that, loud 3.
Dave Preston, are you here? Yeah. Come on up and join us on the stage, Dave, if you would. All right, this is John Larrison, and here's your slides right here, John. Basically, this is going to be a very quick review of the airplanes that we used on SAR. And John, we have tons of time. We've got a whole 5 minutes, so go for it. John Larrison. You can do it right here. Hit the down button. See the forward slide?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I'll try and get us back on schedule. I got a short presentation to start with. I was there very early. Daryl gave you a great overview of the entire operation once we got our shit together, so to speak, in the 70s. But back in 65, I got there, we were under a cover story, we were not flying combat. We were training pilots, which gets into the history, and I lead up to the first combat SAR, and then I'll get off here. But when this picture, when I got sent there, everything was classified. I didn't even know what airplane was going to fly. So when I left the pilot training command, that's what my presentation when I left, and it was not too far off, really. Okay, now if I can work this thing, you say this one?
Yep, forward.
Okay, I won't spend any time on this because it's been pretty well covered. But my 200+ missions were mainly in South Vietnam. You heard about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They were hauling all this stuff down into South Vietnam to supply their counterinsurgency forces. We didn't get too much into the trail, but we were fighting the ground forces, and most of our sorties were supporting Vietnamese ground forces, and then later some of our U.S. Air forces once they came in. So we did a lot of close air support. When we lost a pilot, when we got a pilot down, we generally had an Army helicopter nearby somewhere to pick him up. So we didn't have this operation you just heard Daryl talk about set up at that time, which I'll lead up to and he can get off. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. But he did mention the Geneva Accords. When I give my presentation, the most common question I get is why were we in Vietnam and why were you flying that old airplane? It was a Korean War vintage airplane. It was a first-line Navy fighter in the Korean War. The Geneva Convention split the country up. I won't get into that. Daryl covered that. But buried in that was nobody will introduce modern weapons into Vietnam. And we tried our best, the U.S. tried our best to live up to those accords. And there were several clandestine missions in the early and mid-60s, no, 50s, actually, yeah, 60s, with different aircraft, like the B-26 and the T-28, and they were getting old and beat up, and they wanted something better. So they looked around. The Navy was phasing out their A-1s, especially their E models, which was a 2-seater, and somebody put 2 and 2 together and said, hey, we can put the A-1E in there and tell them they're training pilots. And that's the way I went to Vietnam in December of 1964. The first 6 months I was there, I flew a hell of a lot of combat. Did very little pilot training. We finally got rid of that and sent it to Herbert. But I had to carry a Vietnamese airman in the right seat who spoke no English. I spoke no Vietnamese. He was nothing there but a body in case I crashed. The headline would say, poor old John busted his butt training a Vietnamese pilot. So the government, I think all you people here know the government's not above lying to you. But we did that through mid-65, and this comes up to the beginning of the SAR stuff. When mid-65, when the U.S. said, hey, they're not playing by the game, so we're not going to play a game, so we threw all that bullshit out. And the F-100s came into Benoit. That's where I was operating out of, was Benoit. The F-100s came in and we started hitting up north. And it was mid-65, they decided we're gonna hit the SAM sites around Hanoi. We had U-2s flying and Farby drones, watched them build the damn things. But our government sat there and watched, they got it done. I think they even gave them time to zero in their sights and take a few practice shots. Then they decided they're gonna strike. And they struck, and they lost airplanes, jets and 105s and everything else. Unbeknownst to us, there was a frag order put out for us to send 4 airplanes to Udorn. I was scheduled for flight lead, and I led the 4 to Udorn. It was a top secret mission. They didn't tell us what we were going for or anything else. And when we got there, we found out they had struck the SAM sites. They still had some pilots down. It was later that day. They didn't want to send us in. We were supposed to hover 30 miles west of Hanoi for low altitude support for the helicopters picking up down pilots. They said, until we get radio contact, we're not going to send you in, so we're going to put you on strip alert. While I was on strip alert, a Navy A-4 went down about 150 miles north of the DMZ. They scrambled us off. We went out, joined up. There was a question here about the Pedros, HH-43. That's what they had then at NKP. And by the way, one of the words you hear, if you hear naked fanny, GIs have a habit of renaming everything. NKP is commonly called naked fanny. But anyway, we got there with the HH-43, gave a minimal ground support. We 20-millimeter areas to keep anybody from getting in and shooting at the helicopter. We got him out, heading back home to Udorn, and we kept hearing all this talk about the Pedro, the helicopter, to bring the downed Navy pilot back to Udorn because McNamara was there on a trip. Beautiful photo op. Well, the Pedro, those of you who know Pedro has very short legs. He said, I can't make Udorn. And that's when a young captain, not knowing what was going on, I finally broke in and said, what's this naked fanny you're talking about? And they told me about Nakon Phenom. And I said, well, I've got a parachute and a helmet in my right seat that we used for the crew chief when we went over there. I'll land and pick him up. What kind of runway they got? All they had was PSP, 3,000 feet. We can land there, and we did. So I landed the first A1 at NKP also. So we picked the pilot up, took him back to Udorn, landed, staff cars all over the place. They grabbed him, took him off. I never met him. I don't even know what his name was. I got a picture in my story, which I'll put on YouTube one of these days. And they jerked us off to intelligence. And I still remember sitting across the table from 3 full colonels, and they looked very seriously at us and said, tell us about this airplane you're flying. They had no idea what an A-1 was. We told them what all it would carry up to a nuke. The Navy actually carried nukes on an A-1, believe it or not. It was rocket assisted. But anyway, that was the beginning of what you see here. In a few years, well, we were back only 2 weeks and we started TD-1 aircraft to Udorn. And within 2 months, they moved the whole 602nd over there. The first moved to Pleiku, and then they both moved to Udorn and eventually moved to NKP. And what you heard happen, it built up. And we learned, we made mistakes, but the guys learned. And so the rest of the afternoon, you're going to hear from some of the guys that did those SARS combat mission. And I was proud to be that little piece of it, but I wanted to give you the history on how it all got started. I don't want many questions, but I'll try 1 or 2 before Golden gets me. Any questions? Quickie.
My first assignment was in KP. That's Nakon Phenom.
Yes.
How far away from Udorn is? Because I ended up. This is what I was there that first night at NKP, and
I don't remember, but I bet it was at least 100 miles.
From Udorn.
Yeah, but he had been up and flown to pick up and back, and
Anyway,
the HH-43, as you well know, was built for local area search and rescue.
Right, and that's why I ended up flying over there. But I arrived at NKP, and this young man, that's when you shared room with the guy?
Say again?
Shared room with
Hey, I was a young captain then. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. The key word was press on.
Well, my point is I was there and I met this guy, met him. I bring this up because that night he left to go on a mission and he never came back.
Are you going to be around tonight at the hospital? I said I'll have my laptop there. I got the whole roster of all our A1 guys on there. I can maybe look.
Well, this was the Jolly. This was the Jolly guy.
The Jolly.
Yeah, he was flying behind.
Can't help you there.
No, he was behind the Jolly.
Okay.
Or behind the refuel.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Goldie, you got it.
Let me ask that question about the Jolly. Were you there last night? Okay, you weren't here last night. Most of the people I think were here last night. I think there's a few people that weren't here. But this was, they had the two CH-3s at NKP at that time. One of them was the Camberg, and the other was the Flyer, okay? There was an F-105 down and a Sandy down in North Vietnam. They sent the Flyer up there, and they had a fuel tank in the back, it was a CH-3. It got on fire. Everybody bailed out. I told everybody that was here last night, the flight engineer jumped out and he still had his gunner's belt on and he was spinning underneath it. The two pilots bailed out the window and PJ went off the back ramp, and nobody was in it, including him. He finally dropped down. They were all POWs except him. He was picked up by a Navy S3. But the next day we had another Sandy go down, and we had a S3 went down. And a guy named Barry Camhood, who was at NKP at that time, took the broken bird with 15 red X's on it. It means you can't fly the aircraft. Bill Warren, who was his flight engineer, wouldn't fly. Bill Warren was in maintenance, said, I'll go fly with you. It had only a few instruments on the instrument panel, had no radios, no navigation. The guys on the ground had no SAR radios. They had no pin guns, they had no flares. So they were never able to talk to anybody that flew over them. The guy that the flight engineer bailed out that evening, that Navy S3 came up there, he used his pin gun, he used his Zippo lighter to signal, and they got him. Anyway, Barry Camhoot went with the Canbird, and Bill Warren signed everything off as pending parts, including an engine change that was required. And he went up there for 3 days. He got two of another S3 got shot down. He got two of those four guys out. And then we had another A1. So we had two A1s, a 105, four Jolly Green crew members that were shot down. And after the third day, they stopped the SAR. So that was and then about a month later, they got the HH-3Es. But that was a real disaster. Anyway, most of the folks were here last night and you heard me talk about it. One of the things I didn't talk about, if you're in this business and you were in SAR, I remember my whole thing was I was going to come over there because I was actually never went to the schoolhouse. I was trained at Patrick Air Force Base because we were in H-3s, part of the support system for the Apollos. And then the H-53 came, and they brought pilots in. It just came out of NKP and Udorn, and so they were training us. Well, it was way different than anybody else got trained because all we did, they showed us all the combat stuff, and they didn't really want us to upgrade it. There were four of us, and so we would go out with the 450-gallon drop tanks. We had about 6 hours fuel on board, and there'd be two of us on board, and normally a sortie is 1.3 for training. We would fly 2.6, but they'd only put 1.3 in the books. So I had twice as many hours of flying the H-53 before I got over there, so I really was comfortable. But my goal was to get one pickup, okay? And I said, okay, that's what. So on my after the first SAR, I was actually, it just became an aircraft commander, theater aircraft commander. We were flying back and the OV-10 got shot down. We got him under fire, had my eyes watered, and came back and decided I need to know where every gun was in Laos. And I had a map, and the intel folks, every time we got alerted, they gave me my map. It was all what we called chummed, had everything on it. But when I came back, I realized, and I think the Jolly Green pilots, the A1 pilots realized, getting somebody out of there, we had a lifelong impact on them and their families. And that was nearly narcotic. Because after I did that the first time, I said, I want to do this. Because the personal and professional feeling was overwhelming. Now, one of the guys is sitting out there, Mel, stand up, please. We're going to brief the Oyster 02 mission this afternoon. And the first day we went up, Ron, where are you, Ron? Yeah. So Ron Smith, we're going to talk about that guy, and I talked about him last night. When we came back, I had the squadron commander, or I had the Jolly Green squadron commander, and I told the DO that I'd been better if the seat would have been empty. Mel Gillespie came up because all these co-pilots wanted to go the next day. XB-52 guy, he had the whole map, the route, the guns, everything on it, because I'm thinking now I've got to get this thing all put together tonight. You're my co-pilot. Later on was a Bobbin 5, the Bobbin 05, the last Weasel, the last 105 shot down at the Tanwa Bridge. He wasn't bombing the bridge, he was escorting B-52s at night and got shot down, and they landed right on the ridge line by the Tanwa Bridge. And we had the first really successful A7 SAR. Of course, there were all the Sandys, and it, remember the A7 pilot's name? Huh? Buddy Clark. He got the Air Force Cross in this mission, and they had a 20-mile run-in. He'd auto-rotated through the clouds, because Clark went through and said, hey, we got a 400-foot ceiling. Clark, he dived straight down. Mel and I had already tried this once and damn near got crashed. We went down through the crowds and we came up in different damn valleys, and we were trying to find each other, and he went by a road intersection. They started hosing him, shooting at him. We popped out and said, geez, that wasn't a good idea. But anyway, he goes down. They follow. They had about a 20-mile run-in, didn't you? And of course, they were looping at 400 feet and almost had a midair going around a piece of karst. They get in a hover, and I'm listening, and I hear ground fire 1 o'clock, ground fire 1 o'clock. Then I hear ground fire 11 o'clock, ground fire 11 o'clock. There was a 51 cal, how far, 200 yards? Huh?
Maybe that far.
Maybe that far, firing at him, missing him on both sides. And Clark killed that from 400 feet with a bomb. Later he got shot, lost his electronics, had the RTP, and he came out, and that was the last successful SAR for a 105 crew. He got both those guys. So, but he was my co-pilot the second day for the Western mission, and we're going to brief this afternoon. But the whole thing about the rescue mission was we had the impact on our fellow comrades, on their lives and their families. And it was terrifically motivational. I mean, everybody else had great missions, but I think the SAR force, Sandys, A1s, and we got a HC-130. 3 times I had the 130s come in, and the first day of Oyster, we were out of gas. And my wingman had a low fuel light, and was this coming over the 10,000-foot mountains, or the pass there between Black and Red River. And I called the King. I says, King, I don't think we have enough fuel to get on North Vietnam. He says, Jolly, I've been monitoring the radio calls. and I'm already in North Vietnam. And we'll talk about that this afternoon. So those guys were critical to us. One time we had a mission trying to pick up guys at night and way up in North Vietnam, all the way up the Chinese buffer zone. They took me almost into Haiphong Harbor. They were refueling us. And then I had a second time when they came up and we got jumped by MiGs. We're going to talk about that one. That SAR this afternoon. And I thought we were going to lose those two HC-130s to MiGs. But anyway, we're going to have some nice stories this afternoon, war stories. And
Dale,
we've got the participants here.
we won't get to the stories if we don't move along a little bit. So HC-130, we just need a quick review, gentlemen, of this so we can get on to the SARs. Thank you.
I don't want to stand too close to this guy. Avoiding crutches. Also, party suits. I took mine out and tried to get it on, and maybe one leg it was able to get in. And I previously tried to get an old flight suit on and squeezed myself into it, and I had to take scissors to it to get it off. So, no party suits. In lieu of party suits, this vest I'm wearing will have to suffice from 20 years ago when I rode to the wall in 2003, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life, aside from combat SAR in Southeast Asia. Over 1,000 motorcyclists, 2 abreast, 2 second spacing, rain, semis, traveling, in my case, from Kansas City to DC. And every day there were accidents, and I'm gonna run out of time here, get that crutch away. But anyway, there were many times on this trip that I thought, I survived that damn war, I'm gonna die in this motorcycle ride, because none of these guys obviously had formation training, and that was very obvious. But anyway, back to the subject a little bit. I first met Dale Stoval and Randy Jane when they came down to Cameron Bay on an exchange mission to see what the hell King did to mess things up. No, that wasn't it. But we took them on a tour and showed them how we train, because you don't just create SARs to go out and train in. So there's a training process of about 3 months to take a qualified aircraft commander and get him up to combat AMC status. And let me talk a little bit about AMC. It stands for Airborne Mission Commander. And I always felt a little bit uncomfortable with that word, because in my mind it should have been Airborne Mission Coordinator. Because command is something that's a little overused, and we were a bunch of 26, 27-year-old captains trying to organize a rescue and talking to what I thought at the time with these Sandys. I thought they were old, mellow lieutenant colonels, senior majors, maybe an occasional captain. And when I first arrived on a mission called Gunfighter 82, a guy named Roger, help me, Youngblood, was running the SAR, and evidently he was one of the best ones, because I thought God was out there talking to the survivor. And the SAR was successful, not doing any part from what I was doing, but I had a good vantage point of that and a lot of different other rescues. I came here to talk about HC-130s, and I'll try to make this quick, and I need a cheat sheet. By the way, this is my iPad. It's got a quick and dirty navigational chart, and somebody had a question, I believe, if I heard correctly, what's the distance between Udorn and NKP? And according to my iPad, let me get situated here. Anyway, it worked out to be about 130, 140 miles. I'm sorry?
The map here didn't show where that is. It didn't show the location where it was.
It does on my map.
Laotian border.
All right, anyway, this map was basically a quick guide for us in our orbit positions, our scramble launch points, to head for an area where the SAR was going to be taking place.
Mic closer to your mouth. The mic a little closer to your mouth.
It sounded like I was coming all the way out to the hallway there, but anyway, I got to go back to my cheat sheet here. Okay, the Lockheed HC-130 was a multitasking airplane derived from the original C-130B model, and the original HC-130s were made for the Coast Guard. The Air Force in turn modified them further when they took delivery and included air-to-air refueling capabilities and also the Fulton recovery system, which we practiced on but never really used it. Am I loud enough now?
Yeah.
Okay, get to crutch. So, the functions of the HC-130 were long-range search and rescue, life raft and survival kit deliveries, pararescue deployments for humanitarian reasons or in combat. We didn't use them in combat. They rode the Jolly Greens because we didn't have any miniguns. And they wanted miniguns because I guess they were sport. Overwater duck boat escorts, nav support for aircraft on all major water crossings, NASA support, Jim and I, Apollo, Skylab, STAR, Fulton surface to air recovery, ATAR, air-to-air satellite package recovery, and in my case, worldwide Jolly Green ferry mission support, where we took 3 brand new H-53s across from Eglin as far as Yokota Air Base, and they in turn went on down to Da Nang to be delivered to the 37th Air Rescue Squadron in March, April of 1971, before my arrival in Southeast Asia. So the Kingbirds in combat, we didn't do all those things. Basically, all we did were provide a command post and air-to-air refueling for the Jolly Greens. Simple. But I'll tell you, 51 years later, I don't remember a lot of stuff that we did, and Darrell covered a lot of it. It became a very complex operation, a lot of radio communications, and that may be one reason why I can't hear anymore. But it was an interesting mission, and we had a lot of success. But more than anything, I want to talk about my reason for being here, and I don't really consider myself as belonging on this stage or in the presence of these people, many in this room, who have been my heroes ever since my first contact with them on SAR missions. And that goes back to 52 years ago. Anyway, I'm finally getting a chance to meet and thank some of those men behind the voices in my memory of heroes and courageous men. Those men, I was in such a unique position to observe and hear radio transmissions so many years ago. I'm here to pay tribute to the bravest men I've ever known, or more correctly, known only through their voices until this weekend. Jolly Greens, 81 Sandys, Facts, including the Ravens, and the unsung men of Air America. Those on such missions Ashcan 01, Falcon 74, Gunfighter 82, Nail 31, Alpha and Bravo we'll talk about this afternoon, Spectre 22, where I was lucky enough to find 15 survivors dropped in my lap, and I had to do some extra work to get Dale Stoval started off in his career properly by rescuing 8 of those survivors on that mission. More than any other jolly. I think one had 3 and another had 1 or 2, and then Air America had 2. So that was an all-night mission from about 10:30 at night until 10:30 the next morning. We had them all picked up. I think it aged me about 15 years, but it was a mission without much hostility, but there was a lot of drama to it because we didn't know what was eventually going to happen when you have 15 guys in bad guy territory. So we lucked out, we got them all located. We had pretty well coordinated rescue plans for the Jolly Greens to come in teams, and each assigned different survivors. Well, that all went to hell because once the Jollies came in, survivors were popping up everywhere, and in turn the Jollies would pick them up. Dale ended up with 8, and the mission later became referred to as the Great Easter Egg Hunt of 1972. So I'm fortunate to be in the company of at least one of those people out there. I know there were some Sandys too. And all I want to say in closing is that I've had a lot of time to reflect on what I witnessed and think about what I might tell any of those heroic individuals if I ever were fortunate enough to meet them. My time to do so has now come, and I'm here to say bravo and Sierra Hotel to any of them within this audience. Thanks for being here, and a special thank you to those who were there so many years ago. Thank you.